Hi, this is Chris Monk, owner of Highline Guitars. In the last episode of From the Luthier's Workbench, I began a series talking about how I made a 7-string multi-scale fan fret guitar neck. And I began by fabricating the blank and then cutting out the basic shape of the neck. For this episode, we're going to take it a step further, and I'm going to begin carving and sanding the back contour of the neck. To get started, I need to mark the center line along the back of the neck. So I'll make a mark just behind the headstock and then one just in front of the heel. And then I'll connect those two together with a line. The next thing I want to do is I want to put a mark right behind the volute, one in the center, and then one just in front of the heel. Now I'm going to use my digital calipers to measure the deepest part of the truss rod slot. I'll then transfer that measurement to the side of the neck. I'll do this at the just behind that volute, at the center, and then just in front of the heel. Now I have to mark the taper for the back contour, and I'll do this by adding 1/8 of an inch to that mark just behind the neck volute on the side, and then 1/4 of an inch from the mark that's just in front of the heel. Then I'll use a straight edge to draw a line connecting those two marks that I just made. This will give me the taper for the back contour. And remember those 3 marks that I put on the center line? I'm going to transfer those over to the side, and I'll explain why here in just a minute. Now at the drill press, I'm going to drill a hole that's equal to the depth of that taper contour line on the side. So I'll set my depth stop on my drill press, and then I'll drill the hole. It'll automatically stop equal to the position of the line on the side. Then I'll do the same thing on that line that I made at the middle of the guitar neck. Again, setting the depth stop and then drilling the hole. And then of course I'll do one last hole right there just in front of the heel, again equal to the distance of the depth of that line on the side. Now the purpose of these holes is to provide a gauge for me when I am carving away the wood on the neck. To start the carving, I'm going to be using an angle grinder with a 40 grit sanding disc. This will be used to hog away most of the wood right off the bat. It works very quickly, but you have to be really careful not to overdo it. When I finished with one side, I'll flip the jig around and start carving the other side so that it matches. The holes that I drilled earlier will help keep me from removing too much wood and exposing the truss rod slot. So once these holes have disappeared, I know I've carved away enough wood. The angle grinder is pretty aggressive, so after a while I'll switch to one of my Japanese Iwasaka files and continue carving away wood, watching those holes that I drill gradually disappear. From time to time, I'll check the taper with a straight edge, looking specifically for high and low spots. I'll use a pencil to mark the high spots, and that's where I'll concentrate my work to get things consistent. My half-round Japanese Iwasaka file is really great for helping to carve the more complex shapes, such as the heel of the neck, as well as around the volute at the headstock. I typically make my headstocks about 9/16 of an inch thick, but when I start out, then the headstock is about 5/8 of an inch thick, so I got a little bit of sanding to get it to the right thickness. I also like to use my belt sander to tackle all the flat surfaces and get those nice and smooth. The belt sander also does a great job of truing up the sides to make sure that they're all straight and consistent. Hand sanding will begin with 80 grit, and in this case I have a sheet attached to a piece of MDF board. To sand the contour smooth, I'll use the same 80 grit paper, but this time wrapped around a softer foam block. Sanding around complex curves like the volute can be a bit of a challenge, and I'll use that foam block, and occasionally I'll switch to using just my fingers to hold the sandpaper. To fine-tune the shape of the volute, I use my Dremel motor tool with a flap sanding disc. You've got to be really careful with these tools because they can hog away wood pretty fast. When you start to think that you're almost done with sanding, it's a good idea to move a bright light around the surface of the guitar and watch how the shadow moves across the surface. This will tell you just how close or how far away you are from being finished. To speed up the process, I'm not too proud to avoid using tools like my oscillating spindle sander. It does a really great job of getting into some of the hard to reach places and sanding them smooth really fast. Well, that wraps up this episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. Stay tuned for next week's episode where I'll be finishing up this guitar neck. Stay tuned.